Hello, here's my drawing of Orlando Bloom as Will Turner in Pirates of the Caribbean. So it's another Pirates of the Caribbean drawing. I'm going to be drawing a couple more characters from these movies. I got a couple of nice suggestions. This one was done in charcoal pencil and black colored pencil mostly, and I also used a little bit of graphite pencil as well. I'm going to be taking you through the drawing process. And if you like Orlando Bloom or Pirates of the Caribbean, keep watching. We'll be starting out with a sketch, and I'm using a Staedtler graphite pencil as usual, drawing the general shape of the head and the top of the head and the chin, and then adding in a few more details like the eyes and the nose, etc. Pirates of the Caribbean, like I said, is one of my favorite movie franchises, and I've seen all of the movies, and I think, even though I like the original movie best, naturally, that the sequels were also pretty good, and even the final one was very, very good. They might make some more in the future, who knows. So I'm working on the sketch, and now as you can see I'm trying to draw more of his gear and his clothes. He has a large belt across his shoulder and a huge buckle. Now I'm starting with the charcoal pencil work. And as you can see, I am keeping a piece of paper under my hand. Even though I haven't started working yet with charcoal and there's nothing really to smudge, I still like to keep a piece of paper there because my hand may have picked up some charcoal from other parts of the table or the cardboard underneath the drawing, so I don't want to smudge it around. And like I said, I'm starting to work on his hair, which is kind of slicked back a little bit, and I'm gonna use the charcoal pencil to separate some of these larger segments in his hair, to draw some of these larger segments by suggesting some of the darker areas in between. So once I do that, I'm gonna be blending that with my blending tools, which will mostly be a brush and a homemade tortillon. So, like I said, first I need to draw all these darker areas, and in this initial stage, as you can see, where I'm just laying down some of the basic lines, it kind of looks like a comic drawing with no or very few midtones, only lines, black and white. But we're going to be blending and adding the midtones soon enough. Now I'm going over the sketch and drawing some of the detail on the face with the charcoal. Like I said, my approach to drawing a face is I'm going from bigger details to smaller details, back to bigger details, and so on. So I often like to draw in some of the details before I start with the shading of the bigger relationships, the bigger parts of the face. And then I go back in to work on the details, and then I go back after that to add value where needed. So here I'm using a charcoal pencil to draw some of these suggestions of folds in his clothes, in his shirt, and now I'm using my blending tools, the brush and the blending stump. Here I'm going to be using the brush. It's a stiff bristle brush to blend the hair. And I'm just gonna go over what I've drawn and see what kind of tones we'll get. I'm varying my pressure and the amount of times I go over certain areas, because I don't want to spread the charcoal too evenly. I want some of these lighter areas to remain lighter, so that I don't have to go back in and draw the highlights. I think that the hair already looks pretty good, so I'm not even going to have to work on it much. Now I grabbed a black colored pencil to draw some of the details around the eyes, but I also have to shade the area around the eye sockets a little bit. And then go back to work on the details and then work on shading again. So I go back and forth between larger relationships and the details on his face. I did a little bit of shading on the nose, and now I'm moving on to the forehead. Noses can be a little bit tricky. I sometimes tend to make them a little bit wider than they ought to be. I'm also using a Q-tip for blending here and there, because a Q-tip blends really softly. So if you want softer, smoother areas, Q-tips are pretty good for that. I also use my black colored pencil to add some of these flyaway hairs on his hair. The light source is coming more from the right side, so I'm going to be trying to shade the left side a little bit darker with a little bit more value. And of course, since the light source is also coming from above, we need to stay consistent with that as well. So we're going to be shading everything downwards. The shadows are going to be dropping downwards under the eyebrows and here around the ear and under the ear and under the nose, etc. Orlando has a very lean face here, and almost slightly sunken cheeks, so I have to render that properly. And a nice goatee. So I'm shading the nose now, and like I said, I'm kind of pushing myself to make it narrower, because I often make the noses a little bit wider than they ought to be. As you can see, I'm doing much of this shading with a black colored pencil, using mostly a tapered stroke and a little bit of cross hatching. And even though the lines are visible now, they can easily be blended in, and I can easily make everything smoother. Or I can leave a little bit of rough texture where I want to. A little bit of sideburns there. Still need to make the left side of the face a little bit darker. Well, it's his right, our left, because of the light source. So like I said, I liked even the last film in the series, Dead Men Tell No Tales. I think it may be one of the best ones, probably the second best in the entire series. The first one is of course the best. I have almost like a small tradition of going to watch these movies with my best friend. And these movies are very entertaining, and they don't take themselves too seriously, and they have some good actors, so they're fun to watch. I normally don't watch many of the new movies, or I hardly watch any of the new movies, and I think that in 2017 this may have been the only movie I went to watch in the cinema. So as you can see, because the black colored pencil works a little bit more slowly when it comes to shading than charcoal. I am combining charcoal and black colored pencil, but because I want more control over shading and his facial features, I was using mostly tapered stroke and cross-hatching with the black colored pencil. So it went a little bit slower, but I have more control that way, and I can be more certain that the facial features and the proportions are going to turn out better, because charcoal can be sometimes a little bit difficult to control, especially on a smaller scale face like this one. So now I'm moving on to his gear. He has a large belt here, and I am going to want to create a rough texture there, so I'm not going to blend it in entirely all the way, so I'm going to leave some of that texture. And now I'm using a soft charcoal pencil to suggest some of the folds in the clothes around the sleeves and the shoulders. This looks very messy in this stage, but it's all gonna be blended in nicely, and it's gonna look much better when it's finished. So the good thing about charcoal is that when you're drawing clothes or something like that, which doesn't require that much precision, all you need to do is make some suggestions, and then later work with those shapes that present themselves. So you can see that I did that here with the folds around the shoulders and the elbow, and then I'm just going to work with that, retaining some of these darker areas where the folds are, and then pulling some of the highlights where some of these raised parts are, to make them lighter. I'm also going to add in those buttons later and a few other details. So you can see that I've blended it, and now it looks a lot smoother and a lot more realistic. So these things go very, very quickly with charcoal. That's one of the things that I like about charcoal. This would be a lot slower with graphite, and it would take a while to get anything to look that dark. Plus charcoal is way darker than graphite anyway, so and it also has a matte finish. It's not reflective. The shirt is going to be a little bit lighter than the jacket, so I need to keep that in mind. And it's kind of wide and loose with a lot of these frills. But I need to make the area just underneath the jacket and just underneath the belt darker. This will help me to create an illusion that one object is in front of the other, so an illusion of depth and volume. So now I'm refining the detail on the sleeve. My camera isn't positioned that well, so I'm not sure if you can see all of it, but it's almost done anyway. Still working on the belt here, adding in some more of that rough texture to make it sort of look like leather. And now on this buckle. On the buckle I want to leave some of the lighter areas because I want it to look shiny, as though it's made of metal. So I'm going to want some high contrast there. Now I'm going to move on to the right side of the jacket and do the same thing, just make some suggestions of some of the darker areas of some of the folds in the clothes, and then later blend them in. And the same thing with the shirt. Orlando is probably better known for his role in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and he was later added to the Hobbit trilogy as Legolas, even though Legolas doesn't appear in the book, and neither do some other characters, which we won't mention, but it is what it is. But his second best known role, obviously, will be this one in the Pirates of the Caribbean, and he makes an appearance in the latest movie as well. That's a bit of a spoiler, but doesn't really matter. So here I'm using my brush to blend the charcoal I laid down on the right side of his clothes. I need to blend it in to make it smoother, just like the left side. And now the shirt and the jacket are starting to look very realistic, so I'm soon going to be moving on to finish that belt, going across his chest, and to add some more detail to that buckle. Some more buttons here. And a couple of medallions or something, a small shadow under the string of the medallion to add a little bit more to the illusion of depth, and a little bit more shading on the chest. And now a few more details on the buckle to make the lighter areas stand out more. When drawing metal, you need to remember that there will always be shinier parts and there will always be a lot of contrast. So now I'm going over this belt a little bit more, trying to refine the texture. The same thing with the shirt as well, adding a few more folds here and there and drawing some highlights. I don't exactly know what he was holding there in the reference photo. It may have been a sword. He's holding a hilt of the sword, probably. I made minor modifications to the reference photo, mostly in terms of composition and the background a little bit, and I simplified some of the details that weren't very clear to me, or which I didn't want to make overly complicated. Doing some finishing touches on Orlando himself. And I'm going to use my pencil eraser to reinforce some of these highlights. And when I say reinforce, I mean erase some more of the charcoal and make some of these areas a little bit lighter, so that these highlights stand out just a little bit more. Range of value and contrast is very important if you want to create an illusion of volume and depth. And I'm mostly done with my main character, and I'm going to be moving on to the background soon. Just a few highlights here and there. He has another belt around the waist and a few more strokes on the hand. And now I'm going to clean up the background a little bit before I move on to working on the background. I just wanted it clean before I start, because I want to make a very, very light background with some suggestions of sea and clouds in the back. But I'm going to make it slightly different than my reference photo. Also, when I said that I made some changes to the reference photo in terms of the composition, I had to move him a little bit more to the center of my paper and rearrange the clouds a little bit. So now I'm going to use a hard graphite pencil, 2H, to draw the sky lightly and to suggest the shapes of some clouds. And once I start blending that, hopefully the clouds will stand out and we'll have a nice, very light and very inconspicuous background that's barely there, but enough to give us some kind of a background, to create some kind of a scene. So now I'm using an eraser, this is a neat eraser, to clean up some of these clouds, soften some areas and clean up some of the edges. And then I'm going in with a pencil eraser to clean up the upper edge of the clouds even more, because I want a little bit more contrast there. And this is the finished drawing, sprayed with a little bit of fixative as usual. There's my signature. Here is what it looks like. Let me move it around a little bit so that you can see the top and the bottom as well. A nice detailed drawing with a very light background. Zoomed in a little bit so that you can see some of the detail on the face and the clothes. I hope you like it. Thank you for watching.